My phone lit up in the dark like an alarm that didn't make a sound, and before I even read the message, my body knew something was wrong. Mom, don't come close to my family this Christmas. Please stay away. I love you. The sentence sat there at 1:17 a.m., clean and careful, like it had been handled with gloves. My chest tightened, not with panic, but with a cold recognition that made my fingers go still. This wasn't the kind of message that asked for space. This was the kind that tried to stop time. My name is Henrietta Graves, and before I say anything else, tell me where you're watching from. Because women who've raised children know there are messages that don't need explaining. You feel them land in your bones first. Monique never texted like this. She didn't write full sentences when she was tired. She didn't soften bad news. She spoke to me the way people do when they expect to be understood without effort. Mama, I'm heading home. Mama, I'm running late. Mama, Jeffrey's stopping by the store. Names always came first. Names meant safety. Names meant nobody was hiding. But this message had no names at all. Not Jeffrey. Not his mother. Not anyone. Just my family. The words felt staged, like a sign someone hangs when they don't want questions. I read it again, slower, and the politeness started to feel like restraint. Please stay away. That wasn't love speaking freely. That was love being supervised. I didn't cry. I didn't sit up gasping like you see in movies. I lay there for a beat, listening to my house hum, the fan turning, the refrigerator clicking, the night doing what it always does when it wants you to believe everything is fine. My phone vibrated once more, not with another message, just the quiet pulse of a device staying alive. And it made my stomach clench because it reminded me how easily the world keeps going while something is wrong somewhere else. I sat up and let the feeling spread properly. Not fear yet. Unease. The kind that sharpens your senses instead of blurring them. Monique had never asked me to stay away from her life. Even after she married, even after she built a home that wasn't mine, she still talked to me like I was part of her days. But lately, the edges had changed. Calls got shorter. Laughter got thinner. Holidays became careful conversations instead of plans. I'd told myself it was marriage, work, adulthood, every excuse mothers use when they don't want to imagine harm. But this text didn't leave room for excuses. It was too precise, too controlled. It felt like a door being closed slowly, so you wouldn't hear the latch. I read it a third time, and something old woke up in me. The same instinct that used to pull me out of sleep when my daughter cried as a child, even before the sound reached my ears. I didn't need details. I didn't need proof. I just needed to stop pretending this message belonged to her alone. Monique wasn't choosing distance. She was creating it because closeness had become risky. Someone had been close enough to guide her words, close enough to make her careful, close enough to make love sound formal. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and felt the cool floor under my feet, grounding me. I didn't rush. Rushing makes noise. I held the phone in both hands and studied the message like it might move if I stared long enough. Don't come close. Stay away. I love you. Love didn't usually come packaged with instructions. When it did, it was because someone was afraid of what would happen if the instructions weren't followed. The room around me stayed ordinary, and that ordinariness felt like a lie. Christmas lights blinked faintly through my window from a neighbor's house, cheerful and unaware. Somewhere, someone was probably laughing. Somewhere else, someone was being quiet on purpose. I breathed in slowly and accepted what my body had already decided. This wasn't a daughter asking her mother to respect a boundary. This was a daughter buying time, trying to keep me safe by slowing me down. I read the text one last time, and the warmth fell away completely, leaving the shape underneath. It wasn't tenderness. It was containment. And as I set my phone down, One thought settled in my mind with a chill I couldn't shake. If she needed me to stay away, then something was already too close. I didn't sit there long after that realization. My hand moved before my thoughts could soften it. I hit call. One ring. Clean. Sharp. Then her voicemail picked up like a curtain dropping in my face. Monique's recorded voice sounded older than it should have, like it had been forced to grow up fast. Hey, it's Monique. Leave a message. The tone was polite, practiced, the kind you leave when you know people might be listening to what comes after the beep. I didn't speak. I ended the call with my thumb and stared at the silence I'd created. I tried again right away because I wasn't going to let my mind make excuses without proof. The second call went through. I heard a faint shuffle on the other end, a breath too close to the microphone. Then her voice, small, fast, like she was talking around fear. Ma, that was all. The line snapped dead, as if someone had yanked the cord out of the wall. No goodbye. No mistake. Just gone. My screen showed call ended, and my stomach tightened so hard it felt like a fist. I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I sat still and let the moment tell me what it was. That cut wasn't a dropped signal. It was control. It was someone deciding how long my daughter was allowed to be a daughter. I pictured her phone being taken, her wrist being guided away from it, her voice being swallowed mid-word. The thought didn't come with drama. It came with a cold clarity that made my palms go slick. I whispered her name once into my empty room, not as a question, just as a promise that I was moving now. I didn't call anyone else. I didn't text. I didn't even turn on a lamp. I knew how people talk when they think they're helping, how they say things like, maybe she's asleep, or don't jump to conclusions, and by the time they finish soothing you, the window to act has already closed. I had lived long enough to know that danger likes delays. I slid out of bed and moved through my house like I didn't want the walls to remember it. In the bathroom mirror, my face looked the same, but my eyes didn't. They had that tight focus they get when a mother stops asking for permission from peace. I pulled on clothes that didn't announce me, dark pants, a sweater, shoes I could run in if I had to. My car keys felt heavier than usual in my hand. I paused at my kitchen counter where Monique used to sit when she was younger, swinging her feet and telling me little secrets about school, like the world was safe enough to hold them. Those memories didn't float in soft nostalgia. They pressed down, heavy because I could track the shift. It hadn't started with bruises or sirens. It had started with her getting quieter in small, reasonable ways. After she married Jeffrey, her calls came at odd times, squeezed between tasks, never relaxed. She stopped laughing the way she used to, the laugh that used to fill a room and make me laugh back without knowing why. When I asked how she was, she started answering with schedules instead of feelings. We're busy. He's working. We've got plans. Always we. Always careful. Then the holidays changed. She used to come by early and stay late, help me cook, fuss over my tablecloth, tell me what she wanted to bring. After marriage, visits became shorter, cleaner, like someone had timed them. When I hugged her goodbye, she would already be stepping back, eyes cutting toward the driveway, as if she could feel someone watching through glass. I had told myself it was adulthood. I had told myself I was being clingy. Tonight, those old excuses sat on the floor like torn paper. I grabbed my coat and my purse. My hands moved with purpose, but my mind stayed sharp and quiet, listening for the next sign. I turned my phone, ringer up, then thought better of it and put it on vibrate. Loud sounds attract attention. I didn't need attention yet. I needed access. I stepped out into the night air, and the cold hit my cheeks like a warning slap. My car started on the first try, the engine humming low, faithful. The streets were nearly empty, but my thoughts were crowded. I kept seeing that cut call, that one syllable, ma, stolen before it could land. By the time I turned onto her street, my heart wasn't racing. It was steady, determined, ready. Then I saw her house, and every part of me went still. The driveway was full. Lights were on. Laughter spilled out through the walls. I parked a little down from the driveway, not because I was sneaking, but because I didn't want my headlights announcing me like a warning. The laughter I'd heard from the street didn't fade when I stepped onto the walkway. It sat in the air, warm and careless, layered over the soft glow pouring through the windows, like nothing inside that house carried fear. The front porch light was on, too bright, the kind of brightness meant to make everything look safe. I stood there one breath, listening. A chair scraped. A fork tapped a plate. Someone laughed again, deep, satisfied, unhurried. It sounded like a family settled into comfort. It did not sound like my daughter's home. I didn't knock gently. I pressed the doorbell once, firm, then pushed the door open because it wasn't locked. The smell hit me first, meat, gravy, something sweet in the oven. Holiday food. Familiar food. But the way it sat in my stomach felt wrong, because it carried the message of a table where people ate without worrying who they were starving. The living room was lit up like a showroom. The television played low, some game show nobody was watching. On the couch sat his mother, leaning back like she paid the mortgage. Her shoes were off. Her feet were tucked under her, like she belonged there. His father sat in the armchair, plate balanced on his knee, chewing slow, eyes half on the screen and half on me, like I'd walked into a place I wasn't invited. Two other relatives hovered near the dining table, laughing and talking over each other, passing dishes around like it was their tradition. Jeffrey stood near the kitchen entrance with a drink in his hand, shoulders loose, face calm. He looked up and gave me a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ma, Graves," he said, like I was a neighbor dropping by, not his wife's mother standing in the doorway at midnight. The room didn't pause for me the way a room pauses when it's surprised. It paused the way it pauses when it's annoyed. His mother's eyes swept over my coat, my shoes, my purse, and something in her expression said she was measuring how much trouble I could be. She set her fork down carefully, not because she was finished, but because she didn't want to eat while dealing with me. "Henrietta," she said, voice smooth as butter, the kind of smooth that coats a knife. "You didn't call." Jeffrey shrugged slightly, as if to say the same thing without words. I took one step in and let the door close behind me. The click sounded small compared to the loud comfort in that room. I looked for Monique without making it obvious. My eyes moved the way they always have when I walk into a space. Corners, hallway, kitchen, staircase, the spots where a person naturally appears. She wasn't in any of them. No movement behind the curtains. No soft footsteps. No voice calling my name. The longer I stood there, the more I noticed what wasn't there. The throw blanket Monique loved, gone from the back of the couch. The little framed photo she kept on the shelf, missing, the dust outlines still faint on the wood. Her scented candle, the one she always lit when she cooked, gone, replaced by a generic air freshener that smelled like a hotel lobby. Even the entryway table looked stripped, like someone had cleared it with quick hands. The keys bowl was empty. No mail. No little clutter that said a woman lived here and moved through this space every day. The house looked staged, like it had been prepared for company that didn't include her. Jeffrey stepped aside, just enough to block the hallway behind him. It was subtle. It was polite. It was control wrapped in manners. "Everything okay?" he said, still wearing that calm. His mother let out a soft laugh, and it wasn't warm. "It's the holidays," she added, waving her hand toward the dining table as if the smell of food was proof of goodness. "We're just settling in. Our home is busy tonight. Our." The word landed with weight. Not Monique's home. not their son's home. Our. Like ownership was something you could claim just by sitting down long enough. I felt my jaw tighten, but I didn't let it show. I walked forward 2 steps, slow, so nobody could accuse me of rushing, and I looked directly at Jeffrey. "Where is my daughter?" I kept my voice level, not pleading, not angry. The room went quiet in a strange way. Quiet, but not shocked. His father chewed once more before swallowing, as if finishing his bite mattered more than answering me. Jeffrey's smile shifted slightly, thinning at the edges. His mother leaned forward, elbows on her knees, and spoke like she was offering me a favor. "Monique is resting," she said. "She's had a long day. She doesn't want visitors right now." I stared at her, then back at Jeffrey, waiting for him to correct it, to say my wife will be out in a minute, to call her name, to do anything a husband does when his wife's mother shows up worried. He didn't. He lifted his drink and took a slow sip. One of the relatives at the table chuckled under their breath, like I was being dramatic. My fingers tightened around the strap of my purse. I let the silence stretch just long enough for them to feel it. Then I asked again, even clearer, even calmer, "Where is my daughter?" And no one gave me a direct answer. No direct answer is its own kind of answer. It doesn't slam the truth in your face. It slides it under the door and waits to see if you're brave enough to pick it up. I stood there while their silence tried to train me. Jeffrey's mother kept her eyes on me like she could hold me still with politeness. Jeffrey stayed planted in that doorway space, shoulders loose, body angled just enough to say I was being managed. The rest of them returned to their plates slowly, like they'd seen this kind of scene before and knew it would pass if they acted bored. "She's resting," his mother repeated, softer the second time, like repeating it could make it true. "She's been emotional." The word emotional came out with a faint smile, not concern, judgment, like my daughter's feelings were a nuisance that the adults were handling. Jeffrey's father made a small sound in his throat, half cough, half laugh, and looked down at his food. "Women get worked up around the holidays," he said, casual, like he was talking about weather. Jeffrey didn't correct him either. He nodded once, slowly, eyes steady on mine, like he was asking me to accept the story and stop making him work. "She doesn't want visitors," Jeffrey added, finally using his own voice. "You showing up like this, it's not helping." Not helping. That phrase carried a quiet threat. It suggested he knew what would happen if I pushed past their comfort. I let that land. Then I shifted my weight slightly, the way you do when you're about to move. His mother noticed and straightened, her fingers tightening around her fork. "Henrietta," she said again, sugar on top of steel. "Sit down. Eat. We'll tell her you stopped by." The idea of sitting down at that table while my daughter was resting somewhere unseen made my stomach turn. I didn't sit. I didn't step back either. I looked past Jeffrey toward the hallway. The air felt too warm for winter. The kind of warm you get when a house is full of bodies and secrets. Somewhere deeper inside. A heater clicked on, then off again. The sound made the room feel alive, breathing behind the walls. I listened past the voices and the clink of dishes. That's when I heard it. Not a scream. Not a cry. Something smaller, sharper. Metal shifting against something hard. A scrape that didn't belong to a kitchen or a living room. It was quick, like someone had tried to move and stop themselves. Then a muffled thump, soft as a knee hitting wood. The room didn't freeze, but I saw the tiniest ripple. Jeffrey's eyes flicked left, just for a blink, toward the hallway. His mother's jaw tightened. One of the relatives at the table paused with food halfway to their mouth. That pause told me more than the sound itself. People don't pause like that for nothing. I kept my face calm. I kept my voice calm too. That didn't sound like resting. I said. Jeffrey's smile returned. Too fast. It's the pipes, he said immediately. This house makes noise. His mother layered her own excuse on top without missing a beat. The back door sticks, she said. Wind catches it. 2 explanations, one after the other, smooth as rehearsed lines. They didn't even look at each other before saying them. That's how I knew they'd practiced being believed. I walked forward 1 step, slow. Jeffrey shifted subtly, widening his stance. Not aggressive, just positioned. His mother's tone hardened while staying polite. Henrietta, she said, don't start. Don't start what? Don't start truth. Don't start questions. Don't start making the room honest. I looked at Jeffrey. Move, I said softly. One of the relatives laughed, like my calmness was funny. Jeffrey didn't move. You're upset, he said, voice still controlled. Go home. We'll talk tomorrow. Tomorrow was a weapon. Tomorrow was a way to drag time across the floor until whatever evidence existed tonight was gone. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I did something quieter. I stepped to the side, toward the hallway entrance, forcing him to either block me openly or let me pass. He blocked me. The movement was small but undeniable. His forearm angled out, his body turning, filling the space. You can't just go wandering through our house, he said, and the word R came out again, casual, confident, like he'd been waiting to claim it. I stared at that word like it was a stain. Then the sound came again, closer this time, metal against wood, a faint rattle, followed by a breath that didn't sound steady. The hairs on my arms lifted. My eyes locked onto the hallway door at the end, the one I suddenly realized I hadn't seen open all night. It sat there too still, too separate from the rest of the house's comfort. I knocked on the door hard. Once, then again, firm enough that the sound echoed down the hallway. Monique, I called, my voice controlled but no longer polite. No answer. I walked past Jeffrey anyway, brushing his shoulder. His mother's chair scraped back sharply. Henrietta, she snapped, the first crack in her smoothness. I didn't stop. I moved down the hallway with my heart steady and my hands cold. The door, at the end, wasn't just closed. A new lock gleamed on it, bright and fresh, like it had been installed for a reason. I reached for the knob. It didn't turn. It was locked. The locked knob sat cold under my palm, and for a second the hallway felt narrower than it was, like the house itself was closing around me. I tried again, slower, listening to the mechanism. Nothing. No give. Behind me, footsteps rushed in a tight cluster, soft at first, then louder, then stopping just a few feet away, as if they didn't want to stand too close to that door either. Jeffrey's voice came low, controlled, right behind my shoulder. Henrietta, step away. I didn't turn. I kept my hand on the knob, like I belonged there. Unlock it, I said, calm enough to scare myself. His mother let out a little sigh, the kind people use when they want to make you feel childish. It's private, she said. You're being dramatic. The word dramatic floated toward me like a blanket meant to smother. Jeffrey didn't argue. He didn't explain. He just stood there for 2 breaths. And in that silence, I heard it again, metal, faint and desperate, a tiny rattle like a warning trying not to be heard. My throat went tight, not from fear, but from recognition. I knew that sound. Not the exact sound, but the meaning of it. Someone was trying to move without permission. Jeffrey exhaled, through his nose like he was deciding which lie to use. Then he reached past me, close enough that I could smell the faint alcohol on his breath, and a key touched the lock. The click was small. The door opened a few inches, and the air that slipped out of the room was different from the rest of the house, stale, warm in a trapped way, like windows that hadn't been opened in days. Jeffrey put his body between me and the opening at first, blocking my line of sight, smiling like this was all a misunderstanding. "She's fine," he said quickly. "She's just overwhelmed." His mother leaned into the hallway, voice softening into fake concern. "She has spells," she added like she was talking about a child. "We're keeping her safe until she settles." Safe. That word hit wrong, because safe never needs a lock. I shifted slightly, and Jeffrey's shoulder moved with me, trying to keep the room hidden. I didn't push him. I didn't argue. I stepped to the side, with slow patience, the way you step around a piece of furniture someone forgot was there. My eyes found the gap, and then I saw her. Monique was on the floor, not sprawled like she'd fallen, but placed back against the side of a heavy armchair that had been dragged into the room like an anchor. A chain ran from her ankle to the chair leg, looped through the wood in a way that looked practiced. Not tied to a wall. Not theatrical. Just enough to limit her to a small circle of movement. Her hands were free, but her posture told me she didn't believe freedom belonged to her anymore. Her face turned toward the door, like she'd been waiting for it to open, and the moment our eyes met, something in me went cold and sharp. Her cheek was swollen, the swelling subtle but unmistakable, the kind that changes the shape of a face. One eye looked heavier than the other. There were faint marks along her jawline, where someone's fingers had been too honest. She didn't scream. She didn't reach for me. She just stared, and that stare held two messages at once: relief that I was real and fear of what my presence would cost her. Jeffrey started talking fast, like words could build a wall between me and what I was seeing. "She fell earlier," he said. "She gets dizzy when she's stressed." His mother piled on, smooth and immediate. "She's been refusing to rest, acting unstable." Unstable. Another word meant to make me doubt my own eyes. One of the relatives appeared behind them in the hallway, craning to look past, not ashamed, curious, like this was a family inconvenience. Jeffrey's tone sharpened slightly, still polite but hard underneath. "She tried to run outside in the cold," he said. "She could have hurt herself. This is temporary, just until she calms down." Monique's eyes dropped for half a second, not in agreement, but in survival. Her fingers curled against the carpet, as if she could disappear into it. I stepped forward into the doorway, and Jeffrey shifted to block me again, but he didn't touch me. Yet. I took in the room in one scan. No bed made for comfort, just a folded blanket on the chair. A glass of water on a dresser pushed to the far side, the kind of setup you make when you plan for someone to be there a while, but you don't plan for their dignity. Then Monique spoke, barely a sound. "Mama." The word cracked at the end, like it had been trapped in her throat too long. I didn't answer her right away. If I spoke to her first, they would accuse me of stirring her up. If I cried, they would call me hysterical. So I let my face stay calm while my heart turned into something else entirely, something older than fear. I looked at the chain again, then at Jeffrey, then at his mother. And I stepped fully into the room until the lock was behind me. I turned slowly toward the hallway, where they stood clustered like owners guarding a secret. And then I walked back out, straight past Jeffrey's shoulder, and faced the room, full of people who'd been eating like nothing was wrong. The dining room looked like a picture somebody would post to prove their holidays were full. Plates crowded the table, serving spoons resting in warm pans. Napkins folded like little crowns. Even the light over the table felt soft and flattering, washing over their faces like nothing ugly had happened in the back of that house. They were still holding that comfort when I walked in, and they expected me to break, expected tears, shouting, pleading. They expected a scene they could later describe as me being unwell. I didn't give them that. I stopped at the end of the table and let my eyes move across each face without blinking. Jeffrey stayed near the hallway, positioned like a gate. His mother remained seated, shoulders relaxed, one hand resting beside her plate, as if she had time. His father leaned back in his chair, with the lazy confidence of a man who thinks women's pain is always exaggerated. One of the relatives picked at food like nothing was happening. Another watched me with a faint smirk, like they were waiting for entertainment. I kept my voice low, not trembling, not loud, just clear. "My daughter is restrained in that back room," I said. "There is a chain on her ankle." Silence settled, but it wasn't the silence of shock. It was the silence of people deciding what story to sell. Jeffrey's mother tilted her head, the way people do when they want you to feel foolish. "Henrietta," she said, as if my name itself could calm me down. "You saw what you wanted to see." Jeffrey stepped forward, palms open like he was peaceful. "She's safe," he said. "You're making it sound worse." His father chuckled softly, the sound sliding under the table like a dirty thing. "Lord," he said, shaking his head. "Always dramatics." I looked at him long enough for his smile to falter. Then I looked back at Jeffrey's mother. "That is unlawful restraint," I said. "I didn't dress it up. I didn't argue about feelings. I named it like a fact written in ink." Jeffrey's mother let out a slow breath, then laughed once, quiet, dismissive. "Listen to her," she said, glancing at the others. "She's talking like she's a lawyer." The relative at the table laughed along, too eager, too fast. Jeffrey's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice soft. "Ma Graves," he said, using that polite title again like a shield. "It's late. You shouldn't be here. Let us handle our family business." The word family landed again, and this time it sounded like a cage. I didn't take the bait. I didn't defend my right to be there. I didn't negotiate. I turned slightly toward Jeffrey, just enough that he had to see my face, and I said, "Give me the key." His eyes narrowed, almost imperceptible. "No," he said, still calm. His mother leaned forward, elbows on the table, voice sweet. "The key stays with us," she said. "She can't be trusted." The way she said "she," it was like my daughter was not a grown woman, but an object that needed storing. Monique's name wasn't spoken once. Not by them. That was what chilled me most. People who love you say your name. People who control you avoid it. Jeffrey stepped closer, not touching me, but close enough to crowd my space. "You're upset," he said. "Go home. You'll regret making this a big deal." His father muttered, embarrassing, under his breath, and the smirk returned to the relative's mouth like it had been waiting. They were still playing the same game. Make the mother look irrational. Make the daughter look unstable. Make the men look calm. I felt my heartbeat steady into something colder. The fear that had brought me here changed shape. It didn't vanish. It sharpened. I took one step toward the hallway, and Jeffrey shifted with me, trying to steer me back toward the front door without putting hands on me. His mother's tone tightened. "Henrietta," she warned, the sweetness gone now. "Don't." I turned my head slightly, just enough to meet her eyes. "This is not a disagreement," I said. "This is custody of a key to a restraint." Jeffrey's mouth tightened at the word restraint, as if the truth itself was rude. The relative at the table snorted. "She's acting like she's the police," they said. Jeffrey's mother waved her hand like she could wave the law away. "She doesn't know anything," she said, and that was the fatal misjudgment. That was the moment they told on themselves. They didn't believe I had power. They believed age made me harmless. They believed motherhood made me emotional. They believed I would leave when they pushed back. I didn't argue again. I walked down the hallway with quiet purpose, and this time I didn't stop for Jeffrey to block me. I moved around him like he was furniture. He grabbed my wrist. Not hard. Not yet. Just enough to claim control. "Stop," he said through his teeth, the calm cracking at the edges. I looked down at his hand on me, then back up at his face. "Let go," I said softly. Something passed between us, quick and ugly. He released me, but his eyes followed me like a threat. I reached the room, stepped inside, and dropped to my knees beside Monique. Her breathing hitched when she saw me close. I didn't touch her face. I didn't ask her to explain. I focused on the chain. The lock was small, the kind people buy when they want control without attention. I held my hand out toward the doorway without looking back. "Give me the key," I said again. Jeffrey's mother appeared in the doorway, lips pressed tight. For a moment, she hesitated, calculating. Then she flicked the key toward the floor like she was throwing away trash. It skidded across the wood and stopped near my knee. I picked it up, slid it into the lock, and turned. The metal released with a sharp click, and the chain came off. The moment the chain fell away, Monique didn't stand up like a person who felt free. She stayed on the floor, knees tucked in close, ankle red where the metal had been, eyes darting to the doorway like she was waiting for somebody to snatch her back. I watched her breathing first. It was shallow and controlled, the way you breathe when you've learned that taking up space can get you punished. I slid the chain away from her foot and pushed it under the chair, not because I was hiding it, but because I didn't want it brushing her skin again. "Stay right here," I told her softly. I didn't ask for permission. I didn't ask for a story. My daughter's body was telling me enough. Jeffrey's mother stood in the doorway with her arms folded, expression set in that hard, calm people wear when they're used to being obeyed. Jeffrey hovered behind her, not stepping in, eyes fixed on me like he was trying to decide which version of himself to use next. His father's voice drifted from the hall, annoyed, low. "This is ridiculous," he said. "She's always been dramatic." The way he said always made my jaw tighten because it meant they'd been practicing that narrative for a while. I rose slowly, not rushing, keeping my movements steady so nobody could say I was frantic. My phone sat heavy in my pocket. I felt the room's attention pulled toward it like a magnet. Jeffrey's mother's eyes flicked there too fast. I walked past them without touching either of them, and when I stepped into the hallway, the house felt different, as if the lock on that door had also been a lock on their confidence. In the dining room, their plates were still full, food cooling, gravy skin forming on the surface, the holiday smell turning sour in my nose. They watched me enter like they were waiting for me to beg. I didn't. I stood where they could all see me, where Monique could hear me, where no one could later pretend it happened in secret. Jeffrey tried to take the air back. "Ma Graves," he said, voice gentle again, almost pleading now, "let's not do this. You don't understand what's going on." His mother cut in, sharper. "You saw her act out. You don't know what she's like when she's..." She stopped herself, searching for the right word that wouldn't sound cruel. "When she's unstable," she finished. Unstable again. Their favorite word. The word that made bruises disappear and chains sound like medicine. I pulled my phone out slowly and unlocked it. Jeffrey's mother's posture changed. Not by much. Just a tightening, like her body recognized danger before her mouth admitted it. Jeffrey lifted a hand, palm out. "Don't," he said quietly. Not a request. A warning. I didn't look at him. I pressed the call button. The line rang once, twice. Their eyes stayed on my phone, not on my face, because the phone was the first thing in this house that wasn't under their control. A dispatcher answered, voice crisp and trained. 911. "What's your emergency?" I kept my voice even, steady enough that it didn't give them anything to use against me. "I'm at my daughter's residence." I said, "There's been an unlawful restraint. She has visible injuries. I need officers dispatched." The words landed like a weight on the table. Jeffrey's mother inhaled sharply, the first crack in her composure. Jeffrey's father pushed his chair back with a scrape. "Now, hold on," he said, raising his hands like I was the one doing harm. Jeffrey stepped forward, his calm thinning into urgency. She's confused, he said toward me, not the dispatcher, trying to plant the lie in the room. She came in here. I didn't let him narrate over me. I gave the dispatcher the address clearly, then added, my daughter was found restrained to furniture in a locked room. I didn't say chained. I didn't say beaten. I said exactly what I saw. Simple facts. The dispatcher's tone shifted slightly, the way it does when words click into a category. Ma'am, are you safe right now? Not fully, I answered honestly. The people in the home are agitated. Jeffrey's mother stepped closer, voice sweet again, too sweet. Henrietta, this is unnecessary, she said, and the way she said it sounded like she was offering me a way back into politeness before I embarrassed myself. Hang up. We'll talk. I turned my head toward her and finally looked her in the eye. I didn't glare. I didn't shout. I just let the truth sit in my voice like stone. This call is being recorded, I said clearly, making sure the dispatcher heard it. And I've just described an unlawful restraint inside a private residence. The room changed on that sentence. It wasn't dramatic. It was physical. Jeffrey's father stopped. Moving. One of the relatives froze mid-bite. Jeffrey's mother's face tightened, as if she'd been slapped, because she understood what recorded meant. Jeffrey's eyes sharpened, calculating fast. He wasn't thinking about Monique anymore. He was thinking about consequences. The dispatcher asked me to stay on the line and keep a safe distance. I didn't move. I kept my phone up, my hand steady. Jeffrey's father tried a new angle, voice louder now. She's trespassing, he barked. She broke into our again. He caught himself, eyes flicking to Jeffrey's mother. Jeffrey took another step closer, close enough that I could feel his presence in my space. Give me the phone, he said softly, like he was trying to save me from myself. I didn't back up. I didn't hand it over. I shifted my body slightly so my shoulder was angled, not square, the way you do when you don't want someone grabbing clean. Jeffrey's mother's voice dropped low, urgent, no longer pretending. She leaned toward one of the relatives and hissed something I couldn't fully catch. The relative's eyes flicked to my hand. Their chair scraped back. Feet moved on hardwood. The air tightened. The dispatcher was still speaking in my ear, but the room's noise rose like a tide. Then I heard the sentence that told me exactly how far they were willing to go. Not shouted, not announced, just said with quick fear, like an order they'd practiced in their heads. Take her phone. The words take her phone didn't land like a threat. They landed like a plan already in motion. A chair scraped back hard enough to sting my ears, and the relative nearest the table moved first, too quick, too certain, eyes fixed on my hand like my phone was the only thing keeping their world from cracking open. Jeffrey didn't lunge. He didn't have to. He let the others do the dirty part while he stayed just calm enough to look innocent later. His mother's voice rose, sharp and controlled, aimed at the room like a signal. Henrietta, you're hysterical, she said, using that word the way people use a tranquilizer. Sit down. Sit down meant submit. Sit down meant stop speaking. It wasn't about a chair. It was about obedience. I didn't sit. I shifted my weight back, phone pressed tight to my ear, and I moved one step sideways so the dining table stayed between me and the hands reaching. The dispatcher was still on the line, her voice firm in my ear. Ma'am, stay with me. Are you in immediate danger? I didn't answer with panic. I answered with truth. They're trying to take my phone. I said clearly, loud enough for the room to hear, I was narrating them. The relative reached anyway. Fingers brushed my wrist. I snapped my arm back, not dramatic, just fast. Jeffrey's father stood up fully now, face hard, and pointed toward the front door, like he owned the air. Get out, he barked. You don't get to come in here. And his mother cut him off without looking at him, eyes still on me. "She's not leaving," she said low, and the calm in her voice was what made my throat tighten. The relative took another step. Another moved from the kitchen side, circling, trying to close the space. I saw the exit the way you see it when you've raised children and survived men who think they can tell you where to stand. The front door was behind them now. The hallway was to my left, and Jeffrey had angled himself, so I couldn't slip past without brushing him. They weren't yelling. They were corralling. That's what made it real. Predators don't always roar. Sometimes they just close the room around you and call it peace. I lifted my phone higher, making sure the dispatcher could hear the change in the house. "They're blocking the door," I said. My voice stayed steady, but my heart began to thump in a different rhythm. Harder, faster, not fear for myself yet, fear for what it meant. If they were willing to do this while I was on the phone with emergency services, then whatever they'd done to Monique wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a way of life. Jeffrey stepped closer, face composed, voice soft like he was trying to calm a child. "Ma Graves," he said, "you're making this worse. Put the phone down. We can talk." Talk meant delay. Talk meant erase. His mother nodded along, eyes cold. "Just sit," she said again, softer now, almost kind. "You're worked up." The dispatcher's voice tightened. "Ma'am, I need you to get to a safe place. Officers are en route." En route sounded far away. The room felt immediate. I backed toward the hallway, choosing the narrower path because it gave me something they didn't like, distance from the front door they controlled and closer to the part of the house they were hiding. The relative lunged again, this time more committed, palm reaching for my phone. I twisted my body, shoulder turning in, keeping my hand high. The phone stayed at my ear. The dispatcher heard the scuffle in the movement of air, the thud of someone bumping the table, the sharp intake of breath. That wasn't mine. "Ma'am," she snapped, "are they putting hands on you?" "Yes," I said. One word. "Clean." Jeffrey's father cursed under his breath, and his mother shot him a look that said, "Shut up." Then she turned her attention back to me and changed tactics. Her tone went sweet again, the kind of sweet meant for outsiders. "Officer," she called toward my phone, pretending she was speaking to the dispatcher like the dispatcher was in the room. "This woman is trespassing and harassing us. She's confused." Confused. Another word meant to make truth blurry. I didn't argue with her. I raised my voice just enough for the dispatcher to catch every syllable. "My daughter is in the back room," I said. "She's injured." She was restrained. I removed the restraint. The hallway behind me shifted. Feet, a quick movement, someone stepping into the corridor to cut off my retreat. That's when Monique screamed. It wasn't loud at first. It was raw, a sound that tore out of her, like she'd been holding it in for days and couldn't hold it anymore. "Mama." The word hit the house like a siren of its own. Every head turned. The relatives froze for half a second, startled because it proved she wasn't resting. It proved she was awake. It proved she was afraid. Jeffrey's face tightened, the calm finally slipping. His mother hissed something under her breath, eyes flashing toward the hallway like she wanted someone to shut that sound down. The dispatcher heard it too. "Was that your daughter?" she asked sharply. "Yes," I said, and my voice went colder. "That's her." The relative closest to me moved again, stronger now, frustration replacing restraint. Hands grabbed my upper arm. The grip wasn't gentle. It wasn't enough to bruise yet, but it was enough to steer. Jeffrey's father stepped in front of the hallway entrance, blocking it with his body like a wall. His mother pointed toward the side room off the dining area, the small room with the closed door that led to a den. "Put her in there," she said, not loud, not dramatic like she was instructing someone to put away a coat. The relative tightened their grip and shoved me sideways. My shoes slid on the hardwood. My shoulder hit the doorframe. The phone stayed pressed to my ear, and the dispatcher's voice rose urgent in the background. But the room had already chosen its next move. I was pushed toward that door. My back hit the den door hard enough to rattle the glass in the frame. The hand on my arm tightened, fingers digging in through my sweater, not bruising yet, but marking me with intention. They weren't trying to hurt me, not in a way that would look ugly under bright lights. They were trying to manage me, contain the problem until the problem stopped talking. Jeffrey's mother stood a few steps away, posture straight, face calm like she was watching a correction, not a crime. Jeffrey hovered behind her, jaw tight, eyes scanning my phone like it was a live grenade. His father planted himself where I couldn't reach the hallway, shoulders wide, blocking the path like he'd always been good at standing in the way of women. The dispatcher's voice was sharp in my ear, no longer calm. "Ma'am, do you have a way out? Officers are en route. Stay on the line." I didn't look around for an escape. I looked at the window. The den had one, thin curtains, half drawn, the kind of window a woman would sit near with a cup of tea on a normal day. Tonight, it was my only witness that wasn't inside this house. The hand yanked my arm again, trying to turn me toward the door. My phone pressed harder against my cheek, and my breath came faster, not from fear, but from anger rising clean and hot. I understood something in that moment that settled me. They weren't panicking because Monique was hurt. They were panicking because I was loud enough to make it real. I raised my voice, not into a scream, not into drama, just enough to cut through their grip and reach beyond the walls. "Stop touching me," I said. Then, louder, clearer, so the dispatcher and anyone outside could hear, "They are trying to lock me in a room. They are blocking the exits." The sentence changed the air. Words do that when you name what's happening while it's happening. Jeffrey's mother's eyes flashed, the first real crack in her control. "Lower your voice," she snapped, and the snap was all the proof I needed that she knew what my voice could do. The relative holding me hesitated, grip loosening a fraction, because suddenly it wasn't just about controlling me, it was about being heard doing it. I leaned my shoulder into the doorframe to keep my balance and angled my body, so the window was in my line of sight. The curtains moved slightly with the heat from the vent, and I saw a sliver of night outside. Neighbor houses sat close enough that sound could travel if you let it. I turned my face toward the window and spoke again, steady and loud, like I was reading facts into the air. "My daughter is hurt," I said. "She was restrained in a locked room. Now they're trying to restrain me too." Jeffrey's father barked, "Shut up," and took a step toward me, but Jeffrey's mother stopped him with a sharp look. She didn't want him near my phone. She didn't want him loud. Loud men make good witnesses, and she wasn't trying to create witnesses. She was trying to erase them. The dispatcher's voice came fast. "Ma'am, keep speaking. Do not let them disconnect the call. Can you get near a door or window?" "I'm near a window," I answered, and I lifted my phone slightly so my voice carried. The relative's hand reached again for the phone, but I jerked my elbow up, not striking, just blocking. "Don't," I said, and the word came out with a calm that wasn't kindness. Jeffrey stepped forward, finally dropping the polite mask. "Henrietta," he said through his teeth, "stop. You're going to make this worse for Monique." Worse. There it was. The threat dressed up as concern. He wasn't saying he would hurt me. He was saying my daughter would pay if I didn't behave. My stomach clenched, and for a second the room tilted. Not from fear, but from the sick knowledge that Monique had been living under that sentence for a long time. His mother softened her voice again, trying to pull me back under her control. "Henrietta," she said, "think. You're worked up. You're misreading things. We can handle this privately." Privately meant silently. Privately meant no record. Privately meant Monique staying behind locks and polite excuses. I looked at her face, at the way her eyes never once flicked toward the hallway to check on my daughter, and something hardened in me. I didn't need to insult her. I didn't need to call her names. I just needed to expose her priorities. I spoke into the phone with my voice steady and clear. "They are attempting to confine me inside the home," I said. "I need officers now." The dispatcher acknowledged, and I heard typing on her end, the sound of my words turning into a report that would outlive their excuses. The relative holding me shifted again, nervous now because the house had changed. This was no longer a private family situation. This was an active incident with a live call. Jeffrey's mother's gaze snapped to the window, then to the den door, then to the dining room, calculating how many ears might be outside. She took a step back, and the hand on my arm loosened again. In the sudden gap, I heard movement from the front of the house, footsteps on the porch, or maybe just someone outside pausing, drawn by sound. The curtains fluttered. A muffled voice carried faintly through the glass, the kind of neighbor sound that says someone is awake and listening. Jeffrey's mother went still. Not frightened yet, just alert. She understood what witnesses meant. It meant this house wasn't fully theirs anymore. It meant their story would have holes. Somewhere outside, far but approaching, a siren started to rise, faint at first, then clearer, threading through the night like a needle through fabric. Jeffrey's father's face changed when he heard it. His mouth opened, then closed. Jeffrey's mother's lips pressed tight. Jeffrey's eyes flicked toward the front door, then back to my phone, then to me, and for the first time he looked less like a man in control and more like a man running out of options. The sirens grew louder. The sirens didn't announce justice. They announced interruption. Jeffrey's mother moved first, fast and quiet, smoothing her sweater like she could smooth away the last 10 minutes. Jeffrey's father backed toward the dining table, reaching for his chair as if sitting would make him look harmless. Jeffrey's eyes stayed on my phone until the first hard knock shook the front door, and the house flinched as one body. I kept the line open and walked out of the den without letting anyone steer me, my arm aching where fingers had held me too long. The dispatcher told me to put the phone down only when I saw uniforms through the front window. The porch light spilled over them, and for the first time that brightness did something useful. It showed faces. It showed posture. It showed authority that wasn't theirs. The front door opened quickly, too quickly, like Jeffrey's mother wanted control of the first impression. She stepped forward with her practiced smile, palms open, voice gentle. "Officers, thank God," she said, performing relief. "This has been a misunderstanding." The officers didn't match her energy. They entered with that careful neutrality that keeps people alive. One stayed near the threshold, eyes sweeping the room, noting exits, bodies, distance. Another stepped in farther, voice even. "Who called?" I lifted my hand without stepping forward too fast. "I did," I said. "I'm Henrietta Graves." Jeffrey cut in immediately. Calm returned to his voice like he'd been waiting for witnesses. "She's upset," he said. "She came in uninvited, started accusing us." The officer looked at him briefly, then back at me, face unreadable. "Everyone stays where they are," he said. "No one talks over anyone." Jeffrey's mother's smile tightened, but she nodded. The officer turned slightly toward the dispatcher's instructions still echoing in my mind and said, "Ma'am, step over here with me." He wasn't rude. He wasn't warm. He was controlled. He guided me a few feet away, closer to the wall near the entry, placing space between me and the hands that had tried to move me. Another officer addressed the room. "We're going to separate people," he said. "Everyone cooperates." Jeffrey's father scoffed under his breath, and the officer's head turned slowly toward him. The scoff died in the man's throat. Jeffrey's mother tried again, voice smooth. Of course, she said. We just want this resolved. Resolved meant over. Resolved meant before anyone saw anything that mattered. The officer asked me, "Where is your daughter?" I didn't point dramatically. I didn't add speeches. I nodded once toward the hallway. Back room, I said, "She was restrained. She's injured." The words were plain, and I watched Jeffrey's mother's jaw clench at restrained, as if the word itself was disrespectful. The officer's posture changed subtly. Not alarm, not aggression. Focus. One officer moved down the hall with measured steps. Another stayed in the living area, keeping eyes on Jeffrey and his family like they were objects that might suddenly become weapons. The house quieted in a different way now, not the quiet of denial, but the quiet of assessment. Jeffrey's mother hovered near the dining room, hands folded, trying to look like the adult in charge. Jeffrey stood slightly behind her, shoulders squared, still trying to look reasonable. I stayed where the officer placed me, breathing carefully, listening for any sound from the hallway. A minute stretched long. Then I heard Monique's voice, small and shaking, followed by a soft, "It's okay, ma'am," from an officer. My knees threatened to go weak, and I locked them, refusing to fold in front of those people. Jeffrey's mother's eyes flicked toward the hallway, then away, as if looking too long might make her responsible. The officer returned with Monique, and the room changed completely. My daughter stepped into the light, like she didn't trust it. Her face held the swelling I had seen up close, but under the brighter room lights it looked worse, harder to dismiss. Her eyes stayed down at first, then found mine for a split second, and that glance carried apology, fear, and exhaustion all at once. One officer stayed beside her, not touching her, just close enough to block anyone from reaching her. Jeffrey took one step forward on instinct, then stopped when the officer's hand lifted, palm out. "Stay back," the officer said, voice firm. Jeffrey's mother's mouth opened. "She fell," she said quickly. "She's been having episodes." The officer looked at Monique's ankle, looked at her wrist, looked at the faint red mark that didn't belong to clumsiness. "Where is the restraint?" he asked. Jeffrey's father started to speak, then thought better of it. Jeffrey's mother pointed toward the hallway with the smallest movement of her chin, like she was pointing to a spilled drink. An officer went and came back with the chain, holding it carefully, not swinging it, not dramatizing it, just displaying it as what it was, evidence. Monique's breathing changed when she saw it, a shallow hitch that made my chest ache. The officer's tone shifted then, not loud, not angry, but no longer neutral. "All right," he said, looking around the room as if the house itself had lied to him. His eyes moved from Jeffrey's mother to Jeffrey's father, then back to me, then to Monique. He asked one more question, simple and heavy enough to crack the story they'd been rehearsing all night. "Who owns this house?" The question wasn't about deeds or paperwork. It was about who believed they had the right to control what happened inside those walls. That question did something the sirens couldn't. It stripped the room. It took all their polished words, misunderstanding, unstable, family matter, and pinned them down to one simple reality. Control always needs a claim. Jeffrey's mother recovered first. She straightened her shoulders and answered like she was reciting something she'd rehearsed in the mirror. "My son and his wife live here," she said. "We're family. We're here for the holidays." The officer didn't react to the warmth in her tone. He reacted to the gap. "That's not what I asked," he said. "Who owns the house?" Jeffrey stepped forward, careful now, putting on the voice he used when he wanted to sound reasonable to strangers. "We do," he said. "Me and my wife." He glanced at Monique like he expected her to nod on cue. She didn't. She stood stiff beside the officer, eyes down, hands clasped in front of her, like she was trying to make herself smaller than the room. Jeffrey's father scoffed. "This is foolish," he muttered, then looked at the officers like they were the inconvenience. Jeffrey's mother stepped in again, quicker. "My son handles the bills," she said. "He takes care of the home. That's what matters." The officer's gaze shifted to Monique's ankle again, to the faint marks, then back to Jeffrey's mother. "That's still not ownership," he said. One of the relatives, suddenly nervous, blurted out, "They have paperwork," like paperwork was a magic word that could cover everything. Jeffrey's mother pounced on that. "Yes," she said, eyes bright with relief. "They sign papers." Monique agreed. She agreed to boundaries because she's been difficult. Difficult. Another label meant to make the victim the problem. The officer turned to Monique, voice softer but no less firm. "Ma'am," he said, "can you tell me who owns this residence?" Monique's throat moved like she swallowed something sharp. She didn't look up at Jeffrey. She didn't look up at his mother either. She looked at the floor for one breath, and I saw the war inside her, fear of consequences fighting with the sudden possibility of safety. Then her eyes lifted, not fully, just enough to meet the officer's chest, not his eyes. "It's mine," she said, so quiet it almost didn't land. The room jerked. Jeffrey's mother's head snapped toward her. Jeffrey's face tightened, like he'd been slapped in public. "Monique," he warned, voice low, the warning he'd been living inside for years. The officer immediately stepped half a pace closer to her, not touching, just shielding. "Ma'am, take your time," he said. "No one speaks to you except me right now." Jeffrey tried to smile it off, but the smile came out wrong. "Officer," he said, "you're being manipulated." "She's confused." Monique flinched at confused the way a person flinches at a familiar slap. The officer didn't take his eyes off her. "Do you have documentation that it's yours?" he asked gently. Monique's hands trembled slightly. She pressed them together harder to stop it. "The deed," she said. "It was in my name." Her voice caught, and she swallowed again. Jeffrey's mother jumped in fast, too fast. "We fixed that," she said. Then she realized what she'd admitted and tried to reshape it. "We helped them," she corrected. "She doesn't understand these things. We helped with the paperwork because Jeffrey takes care of the finances." Helped. Paperwork. Fixed. The words came out like little leaks in a dam. The officer's eyebrows lifted slightly, and his partner's posture changed, attention sharpening. "What paperwork?" the officer asked, and Jeffrey's mother's mouth tightened. Jeffrey answered instead, too confident. "Power of attorney," he said, like it was normal, like it was responsible. "She signed it. She wanted me to handle things because she gets overwhelmed." Monique's eyes flicked to me, just for a second, and I saw shame there, shame for believing him, shame for hiding it from me. I didn't give her a lecture with my face. I gave her steadiness. I nodded once, small, telling her she wasn't alone. The officer looked at Monique again. "Did you sign anything willingly?" he asked. Monique's breathing stuttered. Jeffrey's mother hissed, "Don't start this," under her breath, forgetting for a moment that she was being heard. Monique's voice came out clearer the second time, like truth was finding its footing. "He told me it was for taxes," she said. "He said it was protection. He said I was being selfish if I didn't." Her shoulders lifted, then dropped like she was letting something go. "He kept my phone, sometimes," she added, and the room tightened. "He'd sit beside me. When I called my mama..." She swallowed again. "He didn't like me being alone." Jeffrey's face went pale in a controlled way, as if he was trying to keep his blood inside his performance. His mother snapped. "She's lying, too loud, too defensive." The officer held up a hand. "Enough," he said. Then he turned to his partner. "We need a supervisor," he said, voice clipped. and a domestic unit. The words weren't dramatic, but they landed like doors closing. Jeffrey's mother's eyes flashed with panic now. Jeffrey tried one last calm move. "This is my wife," he said, stepping forward. The officer stepped between them without touching Jeffrey, but making the boundary undeniable. "You stay where you are," he said. Jeffrey stopped. His mother stared at the chain in the officer's hand like she wanted it to vanish. The officer looked around the room one more time, then nodded toward the front porch. "We're stepping outside," he said to his partner, already moving. "I'm calling this up." And they walked out together, taking the air with them, leaving the house full of people who suddenly understood they were no longer in control of the story. The porch swallowed the officers for a few minutes, and inside, the room held its breath. Jeffrey's mother tried to keep her posture, but the effort showed now. Her shoulders too stiff, her hands too still. Jeffrey paced one small line between the dining table and the hallway, not enough to look frantic, just enough to look like a man who couldn't sit with truth. His father muttered under his breath, angry words that never fully formed. The relatives stopped eating. Nobody reached for another roll. Nobody laughed. The food that had been rich and warm when I arrived now looked like evidence of how comfortable cruelty can be when it thinks nobody will stop it. Monique stayed beside the officer who remained inside, eyes fixed on a spot on the floor like she didn't trust her own gaze. I stepped closer to her, careful not to crowd her, and she leaned toward me without meaning to, just a small drift of the body toward safety. I didn't wrap her up. I didn't start crying on her shoulder. I kept my voice low. "You did good," I told her. Her lips trembled, and she swallowed, still not daring to speak too much while they were in the room. When the officers returned, they came back different. Not aggressive. Official. There was a third officer now, older, presence heavy. He spoke to his partner first, quick and quiet, then addressed the room. "We're going to separate parties," he said. "Ma'am," he nodded toward Monique, "we need medical evaluation." Jeffrey stepped forward immediately, trying to reclaim husbandhood like a badge. "I'll take her," he said. The older officer didn't raise his voice. He simply looked at Jeffrey and said, "No." The word was flat and final. Jeffrey's mother jumped in, voice sharp with outrage. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You can't just—" The officer cut her off with a raised hand. "Ma'am, you will not interfere," he said. "Step back." The command hit her like humiliation. She stepped back, but her eyes stayed hard, tracking Monique like she still believed she owned her. An officer spoke to Monique directly, tone measured. "We're going to have EMS check you," he said. "You're not in trouble." Monique nodded once, small, the way a person nods when they're not used to being spoken to gently. Jeffrey tried again, softer now, using the voice he used to control her. "Monique," he said, "tell them you're fine. Tell them your mama's overreacting." Monique flinched. Her shoulders tightened, and for a split second, I saw the old habit rise. Obey, soothe, survive. Then the officer stepped slightly closer, creating space between them, and Monique's chin lifted a fraction. She didn't look at Jeffrey. She looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but the wetness wasn't weakness. It was exhaustion meeting relief. "I'm not fine," she said quietly. The sentence dropped like a stone. Jeffrey's mother made a sharp sound in her throat, half gasp, half fury. Jeffrey's face went still in that controlled way men go still when they're losing. The officers moved quickly after that. Not rushed. Efficient. One officer guided Jeffrey and his father toward the living room side, away from the hallway. Another asked the relatives for identification and directed them toward the front door. Jeffrey's mother protested, voice rising. "We're family," she said again, clinging to that word like it could protect her. The older officer's tone stayed even. Family doesn't restrain family, he said. Family doesn't block exits on a 911 call. That sentence did what my words couldn't. It made their behavior official. It took it out of private shame and put it into public record. Jeffrey's mother's mouth opened, then closed. The power she'd been holding all night slipped out of her hands like water. EMS arrived and moved through the house with quiet purpose, checking Monique's face, her ankle, her pulse. Monique sat on the edge of the couch while they worked, shoulders hunched, eyes darting every time Jeffrey shifted. I stayed close enough for her to feel me, far enough not to smother her. When the paramedic asked if she was safe to stay, Monique didn't answer right away. Her silence was honest. She didn't trust the walls. The older officer nodded once, already deciding. "We're taking her in to be evaluated," he said, "and we're documenting everything." Jeffrey's father started to shout, then, voice cracking with anger. "This is a damn setup." One officer stepped toward him. Firm. "Sir," he said, "lower your voice." Jeffrey's mother tried one last move, stepping toward Monique with hands out as if she was the comfort. "Baby, come here," she said, voice syrupy now, trying to rewrite herself as caring. Monique recoiled, as if she'd been touched. "Don't," she whispered. The word was small, but it carried years. The older officer turned to Jeffrey's mother. "You're leaving?" he said. "All of you." There was no shouting, no dramatic marching out, just a steady removal, one person at a time, guided toward the door, like furniture being cleared from a room, so air could finally move. Jeffrey tried to speak to me as he passed, eyes sharp. "You did this," he hissed. I didn't answer. He wanted a fight he could later describe. I gave him nothing. The door closed behind them one by one until the house looked hollow. The tables sat half-eaten. The TV still played low, meaningless laughter from a game show that didn't know what had happened here. Monique was guided out by EMS, wrapped in a blanket she didn't deserve to need. She looked back at me once, fear and love tangled together. "Mama," she said, voice breaking. "I'm here," I told her. Then the paramedics led her to the ambulance, and the officers followed with clipboards and calm voices, and the porch lights swallowed them too. Minutes later, the house was empty in a way it had never been all night. No footsteps, no forks, no voices polishing lies, just quiet. I sat down in the nearest chair, alone in my daughter's living room, and the silence finally arrived like a weight. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my daughter's living room until the air turned cold, and the quiet started to sound like guilt. Every time the refrigerator clicked or the house settled with a soft creak, my body tensed like someone was coming back. I kept seeing that chain, looped around the chair leg. I kept hearing Monique's voice in my head, that first cracked "mama" from the back room, like she'd been holding it underwater. At dawn, I locked the front door the way Monique used to, slow and careful, and I drove to the hospital with my hands tight on the wheel and my jaw set like stone. The waiting room smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. People sat scattered, eyes dull, holding phones that never stopped buzzing. A nurse called my name and led me through a hallway where every door looked like it could hide a life. When I finally saw Monique, she was sitting upright on the bed, wrapped in a thin blanket, hair pulled back in the same quick way she used to do when she cleaned the house. Her face was cleaned, but the swelling still lived there, stubborn and honest. A nurse had given her an ice pack and water. A social worker stood near the door with a clipboard and a calm face. Monique looked smaller than I remembered, not because she'd changed size, but because she'd been folding herself down for too long. I stepped in slowly and sat in the chair beside her bed. I didn't rush her. I didn't ask her to explain everything in one breath. I just reached out and let my hand rest near her elbow, close enough for her to choose it. She leaned into that closeness without making a show of it. Her eyes stayed down at first, fixed on the blanket's edge, like she could stitch herself back together by staring hard enough. "I'm sorry," she said. The words came flat, practiced, the kind of sorry women learn when they've been trained to apologize for other people's violence. I shook my head once. "Save your sorry." I told her. "Tell me what happened." She swallowed, throat working. Her fingers rubbed the blanket the way she used to rub napkins at my kitchen table when she was nervous. "It didn't start like that," she said quietly. "Not like the chain." She paused, breathing shallow, then continued. "It started with rules." The social worker shifted, slightly listening without pushing. Monique spoke with her eyes still down. "Little things. Who I talked to. When I could go out. If I smiled too much at the wrong time, it meant something. If I didn't smile, it meant something else." She glanced at me, fast, then looked away again. "I learned how to keep my voice soft, so he wouldn't change." She said change like it was weather, like it just happened. My chest tightened. I kept my face steady because she needed steadiness more than she needed my tears. "The chain," I said, forcing the word to stay calm. Monique's eyes squeezed shut briefly. "He said I embarrassed him." She whispered. "He said Christmas was coming, and I was going to ruin it. His mother said I needed discipline. They called it protecting me." The word protecting made her mouth twist. "They said I wasn't safe to be alone." She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders, and I saw the shiver that wasn't cold. I tried to fight it at first. Then I stopped. She inhaled slowly. Stopping felt like living. The social worker cleared her throat softly, not interrupting, just present. Monique's gaze finally lifted to my face and held there longer this time. Her eyes were wet, but her voice stayed controlled. "That text," she said. "I typed it with him sitting right there." My stomach dropped, but my hand stayed still. "He told me what to write." She continued. "He told me to say stay away. He said if you came here, he wouldn't be responsible for what happened." Her breath hitched, and she swallowed hard. "His mother laughed. She said you would show up with your pride and your mouth, and they would put you in a room too." The words turned my skin cold. Monique looked at my arm, at the spot where fingers had gripped me earlier, like she could still see it. "I knew you would come," she said, voice breaking slightly. "I knew you couldn't stay away." She blinked fast, holding herself together. So I tried to make the message sound like me being polite, like I was choosing it. I tried to make it soft. "I wanted you to pause. I wanted you to wait until morning. I wanted time to figure out something before you walked into that house." She shook her head, shame flickering. "I couldn't call you. He was right there. I got one chance with my phone, and I used it." I leaned forward slightly, keeping my voice low. "You saved yourself." I told her. "You did what you could." Monique's eyes filled and finally spilled over, tears sliding down slow. "I was trying to save you too," she whispered. The social worker's pen moved quietly on paper. Monique's voice dropped to almost nothing, the truth heavy in it. "Mama," she said, looking straight at me now, "what if you hadn't come?" After Monique asked that question, the room went quiet in a way that felt holy and ugly at the same time. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because the answer was too heavy to speak. I sat there beside her hospital bed, listening to the soft beep of the monitor and the scratch of the social worker's pen, and I understood something about regret. It doesn't always come from what you did. Sometimes it comes from what you let yourself believe was normal. I reached for Monique's hand and held it firmly, not squeezing, just anchoring. "You won't have to find out," I told her. "Not ever again." Then I stood up because my feelings couldn't be the main thing. Action had to be the main thing. The social worker gave me a list of steps, but I didn't let it become a speech. I asked short questions. I took notes. I made calls in the hallway where my voice wouldn't shake. Monique needed me steady, not dramatic. The first step was separation that couldn't be argued with. The officers had already documented the restraint, the injuries, the blocked exits. That mattered because it meant this wasn't just a family dispute. It was a record. The next step was safety that didn't depend on anyone's mood. A nurse checked Monique again, and the doctor spoke quietly about follow-up care, swelling, soreness, and rest. Monique nodded politely, the way she always has, but I watched her eyes. She wasn't hearing the medical words. She was listening for footsteps in the hallway, still expecting Jeffrey to appear and reclaim her with a smile. I told the nurse, no visitors unless she approves, and I watched Monique's shoulders drop half an inch like she could finally exhale. When the officer returned to take another statement, Monique's voice trembled at first, then steadied. She described the rules, the isolation, the pressure, and when she mentioned the papers Jeffrey had her sign, the officer's face changed slightly, not surprise, recognition. The officer asked if she had access to her own documents. Monique shook her head. He kept them, she said. He kept everything. I didn't let that stop us. I left the hospital for 2 hours and went back to the house with an officer present. The porch looked innocent in daylight. The wreath on the door still hung there, cheerful and false. Inside, the smell of food had turned stale. Plates sat in the sink like the house was waiting for someone to come back and finish pretending. I moved carefully, not touching more than I had to, letting the officer observe what mattered. The chain was still there, bagged. The locked room looked smaller in the daylight, which made it worse. In the bedroom, Monique's personal things were scattered in odd places. Her jewelry box tucked behind a drawer, her spare phone charger missing, her purse emptied of cash. The officer noted details quietly. Then we did the part that mattered most. We changed the locks. Not later. Not tomorrow. That day. A locksmith came. Eyes professional, not curious. The officer stood by the door while the locks were replaced. And with every click of a new mechanism, I felt the house shift back toward its rightful owner. I didn't celebrate it. I didn't make it a victory moment. I treated it like what it was, safety built with steel and paperwork, not with hope. A neighbor's curtain moved across the street. Somebody had been listening last night. I made eye contact through the window and nodded once, a silent thank you to whoever had been awake enough to hear. Back at the hospital, I told Monique the locks were changed. She blinked, slow, like she was trying to believe a new reality without being punished for it. He'll be angry, she whispered. Let him, I said, and the calm in my voice surprised her. It surprised me too. We didn't stay in that hospital room long after that. Plans were made. Temporary arrangements. A safe place for Monique to sleep where she wouldn't wake up to someone standing over her. The social worker helped guide the process. And the officers gave us clear boundaries. No contact, document everything, don't meet him alone. I watched Monique absorb each instruction like a person learning how to exist without permission. When Jeffrey tried to call her phone, it went unanswered. When he sent messages, they were saved, not replied to. Distance wasn't emotional. It was deliberate. It was built like a fence. Days moved quickly after that, not in a blur, but in a sequence of actions. That kept us ahead of panic. Monique signed what she needed to sign with her own hand, in her own name, eyes open. She gave statements. She listened. She didn't collapse, even when her voice shook. And I didn't let my anger run wild. I let it sharpen me into a woman who doesn't ignore patterns anymore. Because that was the thing I would never ignore again. The quiet shrinking of a daughter who used to be loud with life. The shift in a text message. The way names disappeared and got replaced by careful words. The way love turned into politeness. The morning before Christmas arrived with a cold brightness, and when I opened my eyes, the first thing I heard wasn't laughter or knocking or threats. It was a soft, steady silence. Christmas morning had come. Christmas morning didn't feel like Christmas. It felt like a new kind of quiet, the kind you earn after a storm when you finally stop bracing for the next hit. Monique woke up on the couch in my living room with a blanket tucked around her shoulders and her socks still on, like her body hadn't trusted sleep enough to undress. I was already up, not because I was excited, but because my mind had learned the habit of watching. I'd made coffee and kept the lights low, letting the day arrive gently. When Monique sat up, she blinked like she didn't recognize peace at first. Then she looked around, saw my curtains, my framed photos, the familiar worn arm of my couch, and her face softened just a little. "Morning, Mama," she whispered, voice still careful, like she was speaking in a house where voices could be used against you. "Morning, baby," I said, and I kept my tone plain on purpose. No big greetings. No forced cheer. She didn't need celebration. She needed safety that didn't demand a smile. I moved around the kitchen slowly, letting the normal sounds do their work. Water running, a pan warming, the soft scrape of a spoon against a bowl. I cooked the kind of breakfast Monique used to love when she was younger. Eggs done soft, toast, a little fruit. Nothing fancy. Nothing that tried to pretend last night hadn't happened. She came to the table and sat down like she was asking permission, hands in her lap at first. I set a plate in front of her, and she flinched slightly when the dish clinked against the wood. Trauma makes simple sounds sharp. I didn't comment on it. I just sat across from her and ate with her, both of us moving like we were relearning how to be in a room without measuring someone else's mood. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. Somewhere down the street, a child laughed, and the sound made Monique's eyes widen for half a second, as if laughter was dangerous. Then she exhaled slowly and took a bite. The first bite was small. The second was bigger. Her body didn't trust comfort yet, but it remembered hunger. I watched her carefully, not like a prison guard, but like a mother watching a wound close. The swelling on her face looked a shade lighter. The skin around her ankle still carried the faint mark of metal. She kept her feet tucked under the chair, hidden. Halfway through her plate, she stopped chewing and stared at the table as if she'd fallen into a thought she couldn't climb out of. "They're going to be so angry," she said quietly. "Let them be," I answered. I didn't say it with bravado. I said it like a fact. Anger doesn't get to run your life anymore. Monique's eyes lifted to mine, searching for the old pattern. Fear, apology, retreat. I didn't give her any of that. I gave her steadiness. "You're safe," I told her. Not because they suddenly became good people, because the truth is, out now. She swallowed and nodded once, small and shaky, like she was still afraid the truth would be punished. My phone buzzed on the counter, and her whole body tightened before she could stop it. That reaction told me everything about what she'd been living with. I glanced at the screen and saw missed calls, a string of messages, the kind that come when control is slipping through someone's fingers. I didn't read them out loud. I didn't hand the phone to her. I just turned it face down and let it stay silent. Monique let out a breath that sounded like she'd been holding it for years. We ate in quiet for a while, the kind of quiet that doesn't punish you, the kind that lets you exist. Then Monique spoke again, softer. "When you walked into that house," she said, I thought they were going to take you too." Her fingers gripped the edge of her napkin until her knuckles went pale. When they grabbed your arm, I felt it like it was happening to me. I nodded once. I felt it. I said, "That's why I didn't raise my voice. They wanted me loud, so they could call me crazy. I stayed calm, so the truth would stay clean." Monique's eyes filled, but she blinked the tears back with stubborn pride. You scared them, she whispered. The way she said it wasn't admiration. It was disbelief. Not with shouting, I said. With facts. And as I said it, I saw the whole night in one line, me standing there with my phone, saying calmly that the call was being recorded, naming unlawful restraint, naming blocked exits, naming what they were doing while they were doing it. That was the moment their feast stopped tasting good. That was the moment their confidence started to shake. Not because I threatened them with what I might do someday, but because I described what they had already done. Monique nodded slowly, like she was finally understanding the power in that. They always told me nobody would believe me, she said, voice breaking on the last word. I leaned forward just slightly. I believed you the moment your text stopped sounding like you. I said, and the world believed you the moment the officers saw your face. We finished the meal without music, without holiday movies, without forced laughter. The table wasn't festive, but it was honest. I rinsed the dishes and set them in the rack, and Monique stayed seated, watching me like she was memorizing what normal looked like, afraid it might disappear. When I turned back, she was staring at her hands. Mama, she said quietly, I don't know who I am without being careful. I walked back to the table and rested my hand over hers, firm and warm. Then we'll learn, I told her. Slow, safe, one day at a time. Outside, Christmas light strings blinked on other people's houses, cheerful and unaware. But inside my home, there was something better than cheer. There was safety. And somewhere in a house down the road, there was a dining table with plates that went cold because the people who sat there learned what happens when a mother stops playing along.